Join me today at the wheel of a Skoda Fabia 1.9 litre turbo estate, and this really is the point where Skoda had stopped being a joke. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and this is a 2006 Skoda Fabia estate. Now, how do you double the value of a Skoda? You fill it with petrol. Why do Skodas have a heated rear window? To keep your hands warm when you're pushing them. Oh, how we laughed back in the early 90s. But then along came the Felicia, which was the first Skoda which was built entirely by Skoda, but using Volkswagen components and, more importantly, lots of Volkswagen development money. And suddenly, the laughing kind of petered out a bit. The only people telling those jokes were the pub boys who you kind of expect that kind of thing from. Then along came this, the Fabia, and no one was joking anymore. The laughing did stop completely. Because when this, the Fabia, was revealed at the 1999 Frankfurt Motor Show, it was the first car to use the new Volkswagen Group A04 platform, 2 years ahead of the Polo, which it was intended for. So suddenly they gone from the butt of the lamest jokes going, possibly, to being spearheading the massive global Volkswagen empire's latest technology. That's quite a transformation. So this is the first fully Volkswagenized car in this compact size. Now, having been first revealed in September 99, the production began in October 99 straight away, initially as a hatchback and a saloon known as the sedan. Then a year later they showed this, the estate, which they called the Combi, in Paris in 2000, and so that went into production, and the whole shebang stayed in production until 2007. Interestingly though, the Felicia actually stayed in production for 2 years after the launch of the Fabia. Don't ask me why, it just did. Well, the A04 platform was also shared with the Seat Ibiza, and if the Ibiza was the exciting, fun, youthful one, and the Polo was the sensible, grown-up one, this left this being the very, very sensible one. And really the only criticism that was levelled at this thing during its production was the fact that it was not very exciting and a bit dull. But that's harsh criticism for an otherwise very good car. Let's have a look around the inside. So if the Fabia is your rather sensible but dowdy corduroy wearing practical neighbour, the estate version in uber practical form must surely even wear a tank top over the corduroy. But this is quite a handy boot. It's 426 litres, rising to 1225 with the seats down, which has been carefully crafted to swallow the entire contents of a Fabia estate in one go. It's a very sensibly well thought out boot back here. There's a couple of little niggles which I will come to now. First of all, the load lip is very high indeed, so getting things up over this load lip is quite difficult. It's actually big enough to shift a washing machine, but getting a washing machine over this big high lip, which is apparently about 63 centimetres off the ground, isn't as easy as if the bumper had, opened out just down here somewhere. And also the wheel wells do step into the boot space a little bit as well. There is a load space cover, and unlike a lot of estate cars I've seen where the load space cover is so low over the boot contents you really can't put much more than a briefcase in there, this is really high up. This is, well, you've got that much space, so again, virtually a washing machine. A washing machine if you stamp on it a lot. Not only, oh, that's a little bit tricky. This goes back a long way. The seats fold 60-40. There are little running strips in the carpet, so it's easy to move stuff. Underneath the carpet, you have got a full-size spare wheel, not even a space saver. Never mind those ridiculous pumpy things. This is properly practical. And then in the load space cover itself, even better than that, we've got a hidden secret T-shelf. In the back of this load space cover, where the hinge is, it looks like a bit of plastic just covering the gap between the rolly out bit and the back of the seats. There's a plastic cover, but no, it's more than that. It's a covered trough. This is a goulash trough. It's divided into 3 areas so you don't have lateral sloppage as you go around fast cornering with a tasty stew here in this trough. It's not got any kind of heating element, it's just, but it will keep your meat-based lunch warm for a long time, all throughout the day if need be. There must be several litres of soup stowage here. This is a bizarre and interesting little piece of practicality. Well done, Skoda. Now, the peak sensible does continue. I don't mean the 12-volt socket or the handy light in the back. I'm talking about the headrests, because when you try and fold the seats down, first of all, the seats do fold completely flat because these seat squabs just hinge forward, which makes it nice and easy. But then, you can't go all the way because the headrests get in the way. But what you can do, which most cars will make you chuck that in the footwell and lose it on the floor somewhere, but not so the Fabia. There are little holes in the back of the seat squab foam, so you can carefully stow your headrests for later so you don't lose them. That is so ingeniously clever. Why don't all cars do that? Yeah, I'm going to get a load of letters people saying now. They do. Have you ever noticed it before? Right, let's take a look around the inside of the Fabia. Wow, it's very dark and very grey and very plastic. There's not a lot livening the interior of this car up, to be perfectly honest. And that was another criticism when the cars were new, is that they were just not exciting enough inside. However, it's got everything you want, everything you need, and it's quite a comfortable place to be. It's a very sensibly thought out, practical place that's not going to make you feel achy and sore driving a long way, and everything is at your fingertips. Let's take a proper look around at what we've got in here. Let's start with the seats first of all. It's very hard wearing, very sensible. It's a bit like, I guess you kind of school or work trouser kind of fabric you buy from Next or Burton's. It's kind of smooth, it's soft, but it's really, really tough. And this pattern looks a bit like if you had a computer in the early 90s, a PC, like a 386 PC, and it went wrong and then your screen did this, you knew you got problems. Now, they are nice and supportive. That's fairly firmly padded, not as firm as a Vauxhall, which is just uncomfortable. These are actually quite nice, and they've got a nice bit of bolstering as well. A surprisingly good amount of bolstering, and so you just sink in and they're fairly comfortable. Of course, there's headrests and all the usual kind of safety stuff. Yeah, now. Right, well, let's continue over on the door. It's got the same sensible school trouser material on the inset part, which you're meant to feel and touch, and hard plastic bits on the bits you're not meant to notice. We've got actual metal door handles. They're nice and tough, won't break. I believe these are part spin electric mirror adjusters and heated mirrors. This is the Elegant, so we've got a surprisingly high level of kit in here. Really is lots to play with. Down on the big chunky armrest, and this is very hard, very solid, won't break ever. Electric windows for the front only, and central locking to let us in and out, obviously. Moving down into a big door speaker and a fairly sensible door trough. Now, you may have noticed there's a little bit of our old friend gaffer tape. This car is actually waiting for parts. The window regulators do break on these occasionally, and this has happened to this car both in the front and the back. And it's kind of an annoying thing because it's all riveted into the door, so the part is on the way and it will be fixed imminently. Never mind. Now, moving into the dashboard, this is a sea of grey. There really is nothing livening this up at all. There's no little inserts of chrome or satin metal or wood or anything. It's just black grey plastic. There's a bit of a texture up here, so you could use this as a grippy area for more Tshelfery. It's a bit of a slope for a cup and a bit low for a cup as well, and that's not going to work. However, sandwiches, confectionery, that kind of thing will grip on this textured area up here. It's a little bit of a reach away though, so you need a long arm Mr. Tickle kind of snack. That's not much else on this dashboard to talk about. It's a couple of little vents to keep your side windows clear, and that's very much it on the dash top. And in front of you, you've got some instruments. What have we got? Well, we've got a rev counter on the left hand side, we've got a speedo on the right hand side, going all the way to 150. That is not kph, that's miles an hour. That's desperately optimistic. And then just a fuel gauge and temperature gauge and a big screen in the middle with trip computery stuff. However, just take a note of this font. I often buzz on about fonts and things, but check this out. This is very much a Russian space age cosmonaut type font. You really could see these numbers in this style decorating the dashboard of a Soyuz. It does add a dash of Cold War Soviet bloc mystique to an otherwise unexciting small hatchback or estate. Then we've got the steering wheel. It is actually a leather steering wheel, not like a rubbery plastic thing. That's a very nice touch. Again, we are in the Elegance model. It has got airbag and horns. I'll do a horn test in a second. There's an old man walking past right now. I don't want to give him a heart attack. A hearse has just driven past and parked in front of me for a minute, which is very strange when you're halfway through a car review. Right, here we go for a horn test. Oh, ignition on. Well, that's a blaster of a horn, isn't it? That's impressive. We're liking that. Now next over we've got these funny little fold flat flush fitting face level vents. If only I could alliterate the word vent with an F somehow, which would rotate. That's quite pleasing actually. It's like a Venetian blind or a Phoenician blind, because I'm going to cut that out. You've got your hazard lights in the middle there, and someone's added a parrot Bluetooth, so we've got many more cons here. Now this is quite an exciting find here and here on something you might think is basic and crude and nothing more than a Dacia Sandero with a fancier badge. we've got multi-stage heated seats going all the way up to 5. Well, I would like that if we went up to 11. Don't mean it gets really hot. With airbag off warning, ASR off, on, so that's stability malarkey, and heated rear window, so you can obviously keep your hands warm when you're pushing. And we've got a radio with a CD player, which is all very, very plastic. The whole thing is just meh plastic. It is a Skoda Auto Symphony, so exciting times. Underneath that we have got massive, well, I'm going to say an ashtray, but it's not, it's carpeted. You don't carpet an ashtray unless you really want to fire. So I think that's a picture of credit cards or something. No, it's not. It does have a little pictogram on the front for the heart of thinking to work out what a drawer is, but I guess you just use that for storage of small items. Very handy indeed. And below that we've got fairly basic heater controls, but it has got air conditioning. So even though this is a basic little Fabia bottom of the whole Skoda, Volkswagen, Audi group range, we've still got aircon, heated seats, fancy dials, electric windows, and heated mirrors. We are in proper Swanksville here. Dropping down into the cubby area, we've got a small cubby hole, just slightly too small to put an iPhone into, or a Galaxy, I guess is the same size. There's your actual ashtray, non-carpeted ashtray for less flammable experiences. Slightly posh chrome-topped 5-speed manual. This is the one dash of colour or flare in the entire interior, is this little bit of chrome, which is sadly hidden by your hand most of the time it's in use. And that's got a leather gaiter as well, so again we're not doing too much of a slummery. And check out this entire leather handbrake, never mind just the top handle bit. It's padded. This is more nicely padded than the doors. This is actually far more tactile and pleasant than pretty much any other part of the car. What a mad choice. That is surrounded by its own private little collection of cubby areas, so you can put as much detritus as you fancy in there. You've got a 12 volt for your sat nav and phone charger. Behind that we've got our one and only, our solo cup holder, which is a little bit shallow but it does grip quite tightly, so we're kind of okay. Behind which is another non-carpeted ashtray. Oh, there is a cup holder in there as well. So, but I have to be honest, that looks like the most fragile, desperately unsafe thing I've ever put a cup into. I would not have that on the move. Maybe if you're parking and eating the goulash out of the goulash trough, you can put your vodka in there, but I wouldn't trust it on the road. So in terms of driving, we have got 2 ashtrays, 1 massive tray and 1 subpar cup holder. All good. Right. And upstairs we've got lights, and that's basically it. Let's look in the back. So climbing in the back of this thing, we've got, as I mentioned earlier, keep fit windows and the same sensible school trouser material. We do have tweeters in the door, and there are speakers in the rear parcel shelf, so decent audio back here. And below the keep fit windows we've got little tiny troughs for tiny oddments. I guess you could fit a phone or something in there. Getting in isn't too bad. Not a bad aperture for climbing through. A place for storing more detritus here in the back of your seats. That's on both sides. I mean, most Volkswagens have this, and there's a nice cutaway in the seat frame so that you can actually get your knees in there, and lots of room for your toes. Your feet have room for activities, which is good. Lots of headroom because, well, the car was very square. Even as a hatch or a saloon, the car was very square, but in estate form you've got a massive headroom. Sitting from this vision you can actually see how they've possibly used the same headlining as they actually used in the hatchback. So it just kind of curves down and ends abruptly, and then this flat area here carries on plastic trim going towards the tailgate. So I suspect they've just part shared with its own smaller wheel-based siblings. Now here in the back we have got 3 3-point seat belts. Earlier ones apparently only came with a lap belt in the middle, but these later cars, this is right towards the end of production, does have the full gamut of seat beltery options. Well, that's basically the back of the car. There are no other fun things to play with in here. Let's get on the road. So the 1.9 diesel chugs into life. There were a lot of engine options in this car, ranging from a 1.0, 1.2, 1.4 and 2 litre petrol engines, and then the 1.4 and 1.9 litre diesels. Either normally aspirated, or in this case, the PD turbocharged one, which is really the one to go for. Because in this format, it's surprisingly pokey. 101 horsepower and 240 Newton meters of torque. You might be thinking the petrols are the prime choice, but the 1 litre is desperately slow, and the 1.4 is pretty slow and also a bit thirsty. So in many ways, going for the diesel and then going for the most powerful and therefore efficient diesel is the best choice. Now it's interesting to look at how this car was marketed and targeted, because at its entry level, the 1 litre basic, most basic one in the UK market was about the same price or even cheaper than the 1 litre Lupo. But the Lupo is a lot smaller, but targeted as a more fun car. Whereas this really is targeted as a sensible decision, a practical choice for someone who wants, well, they're not worried about paying for style and fripperies. In this case, in the elegance, they've gone for some luxuries because, hey, who wants to slum it? But, you know, they've not gone for any silly fripperies that you don't need. Okay, this being the elegance, you do get the air conditioning, you get the leather steering wheel, and you get alloy wheels and that kind of stuff. It was quite a wide range. There was a fair few choices. There was a Comfort, which became an Ambiente later on in production. And over in Eastern Europe, there were 2 even more basic versions, one called the Easy and one called the Junior. And Junior, Indiana Jones style, that was so basic it didn't come with power steering, but to make up for that, it got the bigger steering wheel from the Octavia. Now the driving position is pretty good. You can raise and lower the seat to get your perfect position. The A-posts are quite thick, but you can see fairly well around them. The mirrors are in a good position, and you've got good side view as well. The ride is a little bit wooden. It's not particularly soft, it's not particularly hard either. It's just there, but you do feel the bumps a little bit through it. Steering, likewise, is good for making the car go around corners, but it doesn't really make you want to push it around a corner and have a play with it. It's not that kind of a system. It's a sophisticated enough setup. It's independent suspension at the front, McPherson struts. It's semi-independent with coils at the back, and you've got half decent brakes, discs at the front, drums at the rear. But it just doesn't feel massively exciting. It's tuned for practicality and sensibility rather than for going crazy on a back road. It's also tuned for carrying heavy loads. You can put 515 kilos in the back of this thing. It's half a ton, if you can actually make that much fit in there. Yeah, it pulls away nicely. It's got a fair bit of grunt. Say 240 newton meters of torque is fairly sizable. And going back sort of to the 1980s, certainly the 70s, even the early 90s, 100 horsepower was considered a lot. That was a fairly, beefy car. And these days, obviously, that seems like virtually nothing. But going back a few years, that was pretty respectable. So having 101 horsepower in a car as dinky as this, which only weighs, I think, about 1,200 kilos, it does actually mean it's quite sprightly on the road. If only the suspension was able to take a bit more, and you could remap these things to about 140 bhp. In terms of shaking off the old Skoda image, this car was perfect. In 2000, it won the What Car of the Year award. NCAP, it got 4 stars, which for a car in this category, this size at that time, was really impressive. Of course, it's loaded with all the Volkswagen technology and bits and pieces, so hence you can have your heated mirrors and your electric stuff and your heated seats and all the other gubbins. It's all Volkswagen parts bin, like this light switch down here, and these control stalks, which are just pure 100% VW Mark IV Polo. Well, technically you should say the Mark IV Polo is 100% Skoda Fabia. So who buys a car like this now? Well, if you cast your mind back to when I was changing the cam belt on Quentin the convertible, I had help from a mobile mechanic called Chris. This is actually his car. He has serviced it for a customer for about 10 years, and when that customer wanted rid of it, Chris bought it from him because he knew it was a good car. Apart from this window thing, he knows it's a good solid runner, and it'll do him fine for a little while. Well, it'll do his wife fine for a little while anyway. He uses a van. So is this a good used buy now? Well, bear in mind that the youngest one is now pushing 15 years old. They're holding up surprisingly well. Reliability wise, there's not a lot goes wrong mechanically or electrically, which is interesting really, considering that at that time the Volkswagen Group were suffering a bit with some slightly iffy electrics in the early noughties. The only problems that people generally report are water ingress from the bulkhead and through the back windows. It's relatively comfortable, the ride is passable, and it's got a ton of space. If you're looking for an inexpensive, practical car to lug stuff and get places, and if you're looking to not spend a lot on fuel, this is ideal. The 1.9 turbo diesel gets 56 to the gallon, which is phenomenal. So yes, if you're after a good value practical car which is comfortable but unassuming, then absolutely. If you care more about the look and the style and the handling, then this car probably won't be for you. But if you just want something practical, you look no further. In many ways, this is actually more useful than that double cab pickup we're following right now. Now, in terms of manoeuvrability and being able to position the car on the road and thread your way through traffic, this car is really handy because although it's massive on the inside, it really is a TARDIS of a vehicle, it's pretty small on the outside. It's 1.6 metres wide and 4.2 metres long, which is fairly diminutive, and especially for an actual estate car. So if you have to move around the city a lot, well, as far as you can with the diesel these days, this is ideal. Get through gaps in traffic, squeeze into small parking spaces, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining me today in this rather interesting little turning point in the fortunes of Skoda. They went from selling virtually nothing to leaping to 30,000 cars a year in the UK to suddenly several million a year across Europe. What a transformation, and largely down to this car. That's kind of fun, really, isn't it? Thanks for joining me. If you have liked this, please do hit like and subscribe. As always, hit the bell notification down below so you can see when I'm driving something else, and I'll see you again next time driving something completely different.